Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm Alex Turner from thebusinessdesk.com. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to In the Circle Northwest today, our sustainability conference focused on what's happening in the region. Now, I hope that you aren't feeling too green this morning after the events of last. Fingers crossed England can sustain their performance over the next couple of weeks. But this morning and today's event should be a really timely conference, I think, with the global focus that is on the climate change challenges at the moment, with the G7 summit recently in Cornwall, with COP26 coming up in November, and with that post-pandemic recovery, build back better themes that so many people are focused on as we try and improve our economy and really bounce back from the events of last year, but also with that added understanding of what's required to bring about huge change in a really quick time scale. We've got 11 great sessions today, and they will cover a lot of themes and a lot of discussion points. And there will be 3 themes or questions that I think will be answered as threads throughout all of those sessions. How do businesses play their part? What are the opportunities of being a leader in this space? And equally, what are the pitfalls of being behind? And where and how can we all collaborate together to make this as successful for everybody as possible? As I said, we will look to answer those questions through the 11 sessions. And just to give you a little bit of housekeeping and so you can work out how your day is going to look. If you look at the right-hand side of your screen, there are 4 icons near the top: chat, agenda, sponsors, and people, which will just help bring today's event to life a little bit. So in chat, and you'll see a drop down, you can chat within a session. So, ask questions of the panel, have conversations with people in the audience who are watching at the time, or you can be part of the general event chat that will be going on throughout the day. In agenda, you can see the times of all of the sessions and what we have coming up and who the speakers and panelists are. You can also set reminders by just clicking the box so that you can get a little pop-up as that event's about to go live, so you're there for the start of those. In the People tab, you can see who's with us today. Delighted to have so many of you with us here already, and with many more registered to join us throughout the day. You can click on people directly and have a direct chat with them, message or set up a video call. So do fill in your profile properly so people can see your organization, your title, so that that the networking part of that can work really well and people can start conversations with you. Also with networking, if you just glance over to the left-hand side for the network tab, that's our networking room that also has a cocktail table functionality, sadly without the cocktails, where we can have up to 4 people in a group networking chat, just like we would be able to do were we in person. Just a couple of thank yous from me before we get going. We've had some great support from our sponsors in putting on today's event and in shaping the content that we will be talking through for the next few hours. So thank you very much to Squire Patton Boggs and to Music Magpie, our headline sponsors, and also to Audley Whitecap Consulting and the Northern Paris Investment Fund for their support too, as well as our channel partners who you'll see throughout the day in our sessions, really adding to the discussions that we are going to have. That's all from me. I'm delighted now to be able to introduce our first session, which is Bringing COP to the Northwest, which is being chaired by Anita Lloyd from Squire Patton Boggs. So all that's left for me to do is say, I hope you enjoyed the day. I'll see you later on in the day in a session that I'm hosting. But for now, Anita, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the slight delay there. We just had a couple of technical problems, but they all seem to be fixed now. So welcome, everyone, to our first session this morning, which is Bringing COP to the Northwest. I'm delighted to welcome a superb panel this morning, and I'm going to ask them all to introduce themselves in a couple of minutes. But just to let you know who they are, we have Mark Atherton, who is Director of Environment at the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. We have Nick Baker, who is Deputy Director of Business and Engagement at the government's COP26 unit. We have Michael Wilton, who's the Chair of the Manchester Climate Change Partnership, and Holly Smith, who is Project Lead at Want Not Waste and a psychology student at the University of Manchester. So I'm just going to say a very few words about COP26, just in case anybody listening isn't too sure about the background to it. And then I'll hand over to our panel to ask them to introduce themselves. So COP26 is short for the 26th Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So you can understand why we call it COP26. It's a major international meeting under this treaty, and one of the real significances of it is the fact that we must at this meeting finalise the rule book under the Paris Agreement, which is a framework to achieve the decarbonisation targets that the states have agreed under the Paris Agreement. So it's a real key moment to sort that rule book out. And another big factor is nationally determined contributions, so the commitments that states are making in terms of how far they're going to reduce their emissions. And the parties should have submitted their 2030 emissions targets by the end of last year, but not all of them did. And there's also pressure on other states to increase their ambition. So it's going to be very interesting to see the run up to this event, how that pans out and how the event goes. So we're going to talk this morning about various different aspects. But before we do, I'd like to ask the panel to just briefly introduce themselves, please. So in the order that you appear on my screen, if I could go to Mark first, please.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Atherton. I'm Director of Environment for Greater Manchester Combined Authority. Greater Manchester Combined Authority brings together the 10 local authorities of Greater Manchester with an elected mayor, Andy Burnham. Greater Manchester Economic Strategy has 10 priorities. One of them is developing a green city region, and my responsibility is the Senior Responsible Officer for delivering that green city region. The green city region is basically about delivering a 5-year environment plan, and we've adopted a mission-based approach to make that happen, which means basically everybody's in it together. The mission-based approach looks at breaking down a big, hairy, audacious goal, and our goal is carbon neutral living by 2038. Break it down into manageable challenges, and then we work across sectors to devise solutions to those challenges, and as a collective move forward to solve the problem of how we're going to both adapt to climate change, which is now unfortunately unavoidable, but also significantly reduce our emissions in the next 10 years.
Thanks, Mike. Over to you, Nick, please.
Thanks, Anita. Morning, everyone. As Anita said, I'm Deputy Director for Business and Engagement in the COP26 unit. So the COP26 unit is in the Cabinet Office, which is the department in central government that coordinates government policy. The COP26 unit is the team responsible for putting on the conference in November, which is taking place from the 31st of October to the 12th of November in Glasgow. And my team is working with all the non-state actors. So that's business, civil society organizations, so NGOs, but also faith organizations, trade unions, youth organizations, and youth groups, as well as many others, to build commitments towards tackling climate change, but also kind of show what everyone's doing to tackle climate change at the moment. And the idea behind this is that we've got an excellent climate change agreement in the shape of the Paris Agreement, but we need to implement it. And to do that, we need everyone to work together, all of society. So we're bringing everyone together to COP26 in November. And that's my team's role.
Thank you, Nick. Holly, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Holly, and I'm a project lead at Want Not Waste, which is a student-run zero waste shop at the University of Manchester. I've been part of that since the beginning, so it's 3 years old now, and we're very, very proud of it. I've also just finished my final year of psychology.
Thanks, Holly. And finally, Mike.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Anita. My name is Mike Wilton. I'm a director of Arup. Arup is an employee-owned firm of designers, planners and advisors in the built environment, and I lead our 400-strong Manchester office. However, I'm here also in my other role as chair of the Manchester Climate Change Partnership. The partnership is a group of organisations in Manchester, including private, public sector, voluntary sector, who are all working together to achieve climate action in their own organisations, but also collaborating with others to achieve net zero in 2038. And that's part of helping create a healthy, green and socially just city. The sorts of partners we have include the City Council, the universities, but also Manchester City Football Club, Manchester Airport, a number of major businesses, faith groups. And I think it's great to hear what Nick was saying about the number of people involved in COP. And I think the Manchester Climate Change Partnership is really part of that, bringing together society around climate action.
Thanks very much. So I've got a series of questions to pose to you around. We're going to try and sort of take three main themes, hopefully spend about 10 minutes on each theme. So the first theme was really just to talk about COP26 more broadly and why it's important on so many different levels. So Holly, perhaps I could start with you. So why would you say COP26 is important to you and your generation, and how are you hoping the outcomes will translate into local action?
I think COP26 is just one of those sort of golden opportunities, really. I think following the Paris Agreement, it's broadly understood what needs to happen. And this is where we say, okay, let's do it. And reducing the gap between thoughts, intentions, discussion, and actually putting it into behaviour and action. And particularly for my generation, these decisions are not being made by us, but they're being made for us. And the world that we enter into as we grow up, as we become emerging adults, that's essentially going to be created at COP26. So it's very, very important. I don't know how else to stress that.
Well, I think that yes, I don't think you can sort of express it better, really. Thank you, Holly. So Mark, the combined authority recognises the high priority of tackling climate change. So how will the region be representing itself at COP, or be represented? And do you have any plans that you could share with us?
Yeah, I think COP26 is important for Greater Manchester because we have a target that's in advance of the UK target. And so having COP26 presidency being shared between the UK and Italy for the first time really puts an emphasis on our government wanting Britain to be seen as a global leader on the world stage, particularly after Brexit. And it's really starting to accelerate the government's desire to see progress in local authorities and conurbations like Greater Manchester. So COP's important from the perspective of pushing national government to go further and faster and to meet some of the goals that we have at the local area. In terms of how we're going to be represented at COP, we're part of a Northwest coalition that will be putting on some events at COP. We are going to be hosting the battle bus. I don't know whether you've seen it in the press, but there's a electric vehicle battle bus that's being sponsored to go around the country, almost like holding a hydrogen torch from one area to the other. And we'll be hosting that in early October. We're going to be putting on some mayoral events within Glasgow itself. And what we're currently just finalising is an idea of bringing COP26 to the regions. So what we're trying to do is work with Liverpool City region and some of the wider Northwest to have like a green zone in Greater Manchester and potentially in Liverpool as well, that people can go and visit during COP26, and it will be connected digitally to Glasgow. That's still to be confirmed, but that's what we're working on at the moment.
Excellent. That sounds really exciting. So Mike, COP26 is really only one part of what's turning out to be quite a sort of super year. With we've got COP15 on the biodiversity, we've got G7, we've got G20. So as a sustainability professional, what can you tell us about some of these big priorities and the importance of sort of galvanizing the global momentum behind all of this?
I think Mark and Holly have sort of set out the aspirations everyone has for COP. And I think Holly in particular, that importance for young people to see our generation of leaders make the decisions they need to make in order to get that transformative action, I think is a really clear call for action. And that's what we're looking for our government to achieve on that. I think from a local perspective, I'm not minimizing the importance of those meetings. Those meetings are really important, but actually as a way of galvanizing local action, the platform that COP will give to climate change action in this nation in the next 6 months should not be underestimated and should not be, we need to exploit it so that we can use it. We know as a country we are behind on our carbon emissions trajectories. Committee for Climate Change set that out again a couple of weeks ago. So we need to make sure that we are ready as sustainability professions to help businesses, help organizations, help individuals, give them the tools. So they say, I see this really important thing on television. I hear these people talking about it. What difference does it make to our lives? And so as a climate change partnerships, we're doing work with business, we're doing work with communities around Manchester to give them the tools to actually take climate action in their own lives, which they believe they were more likely to do when they see what's happening around COP in the next part of the rest of the year.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, that's translating it out is complicated. But so Nick, perhaps you could let us know a bit more about what your department's focusing on, and what COP20, also what will COP26 look and feel like as an event.
Thanks, Anita. So maybe the second part of that question first. So I mean, firstly, it's going to be an in-person event. So there's been quite a lot of speculation, obviously, given the COVID context within which we've all been living over the last 18 months or so. But it will be an in-person event in Glasgow from the 31st of October to the 12th of November. So that's the first thing to say. As with other COPs, it will be divided up into a blue zone and a green zone. And so the blue zone, for the purposes of the conference, is UN territory. So that's where all the negotiations take place, and that's where all the international delegates have access to. And then there's the green zone, which is a more public-facing area, and that's where a lot of our stakeholders, the civil society organizations, companies, young people, will be able to have speaking events, but also exhibits to show what is going on climate action and what the impacts of climate change are. So, I mean, I think they're the two main things that we want to do, is to show progress, that we have got momentum, we are tackling climate change, lots is being done, and to give a sense of progress, but that it is an urgent problem, we need to tackle it, and these are the reasons why.
Thank you. So if we come down a bit then to the regional view, I know we've touched on it a bit already, but let's talk a bit more about bringing COP to the regions. So what's happening at the regional and local level, and also how can people get involved? So Mark, if I can come back to you, what else can you say about what's happening in the Greater Manchester area to address climate change, and what sort of programs and what sort of engagement are ongoing?
Great, thank you. So there's quite a lot already ongoing. I mentioned in my introductory remarks that we have a mission-based approach, and we've broken down into challenge groups, so that there are about 120 different organisations involved in those challenge groups. And as a result of that activity, there's a range of initiatives that have already been achieved or are ongoing, and I'll just mention a couple of them. So as local authorities, we've been successful in getting £80 million from government for public sector decarbonisation, which basically means that of the 2,700 public buildings in Greater Manchester, we'll be trying to retrofit about 156 of them this year. Similarly, we've secured 27 million to run the Green Homes Grant local authority delivery scheme. Now, this is basically supporting fuel poor properties in Greater Manchester residents to retrofit their homes for greater energy efficiency, but also to install low carbon heating measures. We've just about launched an energy innovation agency with the main universities in Greater Manchester and some of our private sector partners. And the purpose of that is really to try and bring some of the cutting edge, bleeding edge almost, innovations that are happening within Greater Manchester businesses to greater commercialisation quicker than was previously possible, utilising the science base of our universities, but also almost creating a glide path for businesses that want to innovate and want to introduce something new into the market, because we need to, speed is of essence now. We really need to make substantial change in the next 5 to 10 years if we've got any hope of hitting our carbon budgets. On the transport side, you'll people in Manchester will be aware that the Mayor's been very keen on bus reform. We'll be introducing a clean air zone, which is very much about quality improvement, but will also have an impact on tailpipe emissions for carbon. There's a huge amount of work going on walking and cycling, introducing new walking and cycling routes across Greater Manchester. And our waste contractor, Suez, has also opened 2 reuse shops. So they manage our domestic waste, and what they're increasingly starting to do is work out how we can put some of that good material to better use. And that varies from recycling as much of the material as we can, but those components or pieces of equipment or tools or games or whatever it is that can be immediately put back into the consumer cycle are going into reuse shops, which are being developed across Greater Manchester. And I'll speak a little bit later about what we're doing on the natural environment, but there's quite a significant bit going on to try and tackle the biodiversity emergency and not just the climate emergency.
Thanks, Mark. Holly, perhaps I can come to you, particularly you're nodding a lot there, and I know obviously your involvement with the Want Not Waste initiative, probably there's a lot of what Mark was saying that chimed with that. But so, you know, by all means, tell us a bit more about that, but also, you know, how should we, you know, as you said, the kind of the older generation who are going to be making these decisions and these agreements, how should we be engaging with the next generation to get them involved in local change?
I think ultimately most young people are climate aware, and I think sometimes that is overlooked, that trying to educate young people or convince them that it's something worth learning about. But we're here and we're ready. We're already learning about things. It's very mainstream now to know about climate change and to care about it. So I think it's moving from trying to convince people that is something to care about to actually providing opportunities to do things and reframing it a bit. So the things that younger people, families, the various groups that are in Manchester can do are going to be different to what a climate board can do in a business. You know, I think when the leaders at these events need to consider who they're representing and what it actually looks like for a family who can barely afford to feed their children, or kids that have really scruffy clothes going to school because it's hand-me-downs that don't quite fit them right. Climate change is not something they can afford to worry about in the way it's framed right now. Saying that we've got billions of pounds in funding and stuff is amazing, but for those people, it just sustainability is expensive in their eyes, you know. But there are so many ways that we can support people by making a green transition rather than making it a more expensive lifestyle, and just sort of looking at who are you supporting, who's in your group, what area of Manchester are you representing, and what are their priorities, and how can you reframe the different areas of climate change to fit that. That's what I think is important.
Thanks, Holly. That's really interesting. And Mike, I mean, perhaps you could follow on from that, because this idea about driving change, the collective approach. What do you think?
First of all, be slightly cheeky and continue answering Holly's question because it's really important. That's all right. We've set up a Manchester Youth Board, which is part of our organisation driving forward climate action. They're shortly going to release their manifesto, and it's going to make really uncomfortable reading because lots of things in there are very challenging for the consensus about where we're going. And that's exactly what we want the Youth Board to be doing, to be challenging us to push us further to where they know where their site is going to be that's being created for them. So really keen on engagement with young people across Manchester, across Greater Manchester, to drive things forward. So that's a really important part of it. I talked a bit before about partnership and how important partnership is. We're a partnership. People sometimes think climate action is something that government needs to do, something that local authorities need to do. Everyone sets targets, everyone has climate emergency. It's not. It's an action we all need to be involved in business, in community organisations, everywhere else. So partnership is really important going forward. There is so much appetite out there for climate action that needs help, support, guidance and space to collaborate. So that's really important. We're collaborating not just in Manchester, we're collaborating with Mark and his colleagues around Greater Manchester, other districts. we're collaborating with cities across the world, actually, through the C40 Organisation of Leading Cities. We're doing a really interesting piece of work around business engagement, and a pilot with New York, with Stockholm, other cities around the world, sharing intelligence on how we can best collaborate with business around there. So that's really important. My plea for today is around engagement with government, because there are organisations like us in Manchester, but it's not just in Manchester. I know organisations like us in many other cities around the UK, and we're desperate for collaboration with government around climate action. I think we see a debate sometimes in national government around top-down approaches rather than bottom-up approaches. We really are really keen and open for effective collaboration to help deliver the nation's objectives around climate change.
Thanks, Mike. Seems like an ideal moment to bring Nick back in. So I was going to ask you, and it chimes perfectly with what Mike's just said, really, about your government outreach and engagement activities. You know, you've heard Mike's plea there, and perhaps you could respond to that and tell us a bit about the work you're doing to deliver that engagement.
Thanks, Anita, and thanks, Mike. Yeah, collaboration is one of the excuse me, is one of the key goals for COP. So Alok Sharma, as COP president, in a speech in the middle of May, set out kind of 4 key themes, 4 key goals of what we want to get out of COP26. So collaboration was one of the main things that we want to accelerate, expand, and build on. I mean, climate change is obviously a global challenge, and we need to meet it together. So that means collaboration, not only between sectors, so between, as Mike was saying, between government, business, civil society, youth organizations, academia as well. I mean, the amazing research and innovation going on in academia, working together across sectors, but also internationally, and that's really important. I mean, at the end of the day, COP26 is a huge, big global event. I mean, it's the biggest global conference that the UK will have put on. So, I mean, international collaboration is a major theme. The other key goals that we are working towards are mitigation. So that is reducing emissions, keeping that really important goal that Paris set of 1.5, keeping that alive and within reach. At the moment, we're not on target to hit it. We're not close. There's loads of climate action going on, and it's brilliant, but we're not close to meeting it. So we need to accelerate emissions reductions. Secondly is adaptation. So protecting lives and livelihoods from the impacts of climate change. They're already with us. We already see the huge big storms around the world, the wildfires. The impacts are already here and clear for everyone to see. So adaptation is our second big goal. Third is finance. So really to be able to face the impacts of climate change, develop the new technologies needed to reduce emissions, we need a massive increase in climate finance. The world set an ambition of reaching $100 billion of climate finance a year. We're not delivering that at the moment. So that is our third major goal of COP26, is to deliver on that commitment. And fourthly is the one that I started with, actually, is collaboration. So expanding and accelerating collaboration between sectors and internationally as well. I can say a little bit about what we're asking of businesses, of cities and other organizations. So, I mean, our first big ask of businesses is to set net zero targets, to get to net zero by 2050 at the absolute latest, but preferably make as much progress as possible, halve emissions by 2030, to set science-based targets, which is a way of measuring and independently monitoring progress towards those net zero targets, and to publish a short to medium term action plan. So that's a 5 to 10 year action plan of how they are going to deliver those. And if you manage to do all of that, then you are essentially fulfilling the criteria for signing up to the Race to Zero, which is a campaign launched by Nigel Topping's team, the high-level champion, who we work really closely with. His team is, he's got a slightly separate mandate. He's not a UK government representative. He's got a UN mandate, but he's working with a lot of the same stakeholders that we are. And he's launched this Race to Zero campaign in June last year. So we want as many businesses, cities, universities, and other organizations to sign up to that and to join it, commit to reaching net zero. He also launched at the beginning of this year a campaign called the Race to Resilience, which is a similar campaign, but really focused on that theme that I was talking about of adaptation. So building resilience, particularly of really vulnerable communities and those most impacted by climate change around the world. And as Holly was saying, often that is young people, indigenous people, and often the poorest in society and around the world. So really increasing their resilience, and part of that is improving access to finance and increasing the amount of finance available to develop things like disaster response, flood mitigation measures, all these things that will help mitigate the impacts of climate change that are with us already.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks very much for that very, very good explanation. I'm going to move on. We've got our final sort of theme. And just before I do that, I just wanted to say that we hopefully will have a couple of minutes left at the end for questions. So if anybody in the audience has got any burning questions for our panel, you could pop them into the Blue Stage chat, and then hopefully we would be able to pick up a couple of those in the last few minutes of the session. But I wanted to move now and talk about sort of perhaps looking further forward. So we obviously talked a lot about COP26 and the build up to it, but obviously we are looking here at, that's one stage in the journey, and we're looking here at the longer term targets. So how can we harness that momentum that we've got to foster real change in the Northwest and elsewhere? And what should be our next priorities? So Mark, perhaps coming back to you again, Greater Manchester has got quite a lot of projects, the transition to a low carbon economy. How do you think you'll harness COP to move forward towards your goals?
So I think we're in a really good place, but we're behind where we need to be. So we've done quite a lot of thinking and research and planning, and now we really need to move and accelerate into delivery. And there's a couple of things that we're currently doing that will enable us to do that quicker over the next couple of years. So we've been successful in getting some funding to look at what we're calling local area energy plans. And what this basically will do is, at a very granular level, almost a street by street level, work out what we need to do in terms of energy efficiency and energy generation. And once you have those plans in place, I believe that a decarbonised energy system is a decentralised energy system. That means that we need to generate more renewable energy locally. Some people don't know that about £5 billion a year leaves Greater Manchester in energy bills. And what I want to do is try and generate more of that renewable energy within the system, because I think generating it locally, storing it locally, and making it available to buildings and to power our vehicles at the time that they need that power, almost developing a smart energy system locally, is really where we need to be. It's not just from a carbon perspective that I say this, but it's about the finance. So when you start thinking about how you make some of these schemes stack up financially, how do you track investment for things like electric vehicle charging, or for more energy efficiency measures in our buildings, or for installing solar PV cells? They only really stack up and make sense when you are able to blend them together and merge them together, so that you have an income stream that allows you to support some of the things which have a longer payback period. So the local energy plans, I think, are key to our way forward. The Mayor has just set up a retrofit task force. He's very ambitious in terms of how many properties we need to retrofit over the next 3 years. To give you an idea, there are 1.2 million homes in Greater Manchester. We think 80% of them will require some form of retrofitting. That means almost 50 to 60,000 properties per year, which is huge when you think about it. And we need to get the businesses in the construction sector geared up to be able to support that delivery. We need to be able to get our colleges getting good people through the right qualifications to support those businesses to grow. And the mayor believes, and I believe, that there are very few jobs in the future that you could say is a job for life, but working on smart energy and retrofit of our buildings is going to take the next 30 years. And we need to train up our young people in particular and reskill those people who are out of work, sadly, because of the pandemic, to really engage with that momentum, because that's what we need right now.
Thanks, Mark. And Mike, there will have to be some tough choices made, but a lot of businesses in particular. And how are you seeing those sorts of decisions being made?
Thank you, Anita. I'd like to just briefly park my normal positivity and just talk on a couple of challenges that face us. One is around aviation. The Manchester Partnership includes both Manchester Airport Group, owner of Manchester Airport, Stansted, East Midland Airports, but also includes Friends of the Earth and climate campaigners. And it's been a really good forum for us to have a really constructive debate around the future of aviation. And there was a huge amount of agreement across both parties about what needs to be done. However, and there's one really key area of difference going forward. There is the hope that we'll be able to develop new zero carbon fuels, and I know the government and the aviation industry are working really hard at that. But there is also that's not going to happen quick enough, and we do need to start reducing flights. Now, clearly, that is a real challenge to the aviation industry. So that how we resolve those questions, I think, is really important. Do we wait for a better fuel to come along, or do we need to start making substantial reductions in flight? And that's a challenge for industry and a challenge for Manchester. The other one Mark's already alluded to is around heating at home. I know we're waiting for the government's heat strategy. That's going to be really important to do it. But Mark has set out some of the challenges around retrofitting in Greater Manchester, the 1.2 million homes, to reduce demand. Again, there is a hope that hydrogen will come along to become the replacement for methane and provide a substantial way towards heating homes. Again, is that going to come quick enough? Are we going to be able to develop enough hydrogen sources in order to take the other things that desperately need hydrogen, heavy talk transport, industry, cement production, glass production, those sorts of things? Will we have enough hydrogen left to make a dent in homes, or do we need to do the program that Mark has set out urgently to really reduce demand in the home so that we can start to match it? We could say we need to do both, but I think we need to really focus on some of those things, or do we just think that technology is going to come and solve the day in 15 years' time? Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And I think, Holly, you've got some ideas on practical things that local authorities can do and get involved in, how to engage with people further.
Yeah, I think something that I had been reflecting on recently was just how accessible it is to get involved with like green projects, opportunities, work, etc. as a young person. If you compare it to other social justice issues, if I want experience in health and social care, or homelessness, or like well-being, mental health, refugees, easy. There are many projects, and they're super easy to sign up to. But if you want to try and find an environmental related project, they're either super niche, they're nowhere near as many, but the passion is just as much there. And that's why the youth were taken to the streets, because that's forming your own opportunities, having strikes, all these sorts of things, forming after school clubs because the school wasn't providing one for you. These sorts of things, I think, is what's going to make the difference, because it's meant to be the decade of action, right? So having sort of mentoring projects. So you've got a club that younger kids can go to, and you've got the older students that run the club, and then eventually the attendees become the mentors, and it's just a self-generating project, creating leadership skills and all these sorts of things. Everything that we do for other social justice issues, just replace it with climate change, climate action, sustainability, and just more of that, basically, more opportunities, because comparing to other stuff, there's just nowhere near as many.
Thanks. That's really interesting perspective. And so, Nick, perhaps to end with you for this session, what's your takeaway advice? So a Northwest business or an individual who wants to get involved, they want to make a difference, what are your key takeaway bits of advice?
Thanks, Anita. Maybe to pick up on Holly's last point about everyone getting involved. I mean, it's absolutely crucial. We all need to kind of contribute and work together. And one of the things we want to do is promote what everyone's doing, because there is so much going on and not everyone knows what is going on. So we set up a Together for Our Planet campaign that's running up until COP. So the link is on our COP26 website. And what we want to is hear all the climate action that people are taking and then promote that so that people can get involved. And the idea is that kind of local communities, businesses, everyone around the country can get involved. And it is COP26 is an international conference, but it is also one that we're hosting as the whole of the UK. And we want people around the country to get involved and to feel involved. On kind of what businesses and cities and others can do, I would say kind of go back to my key ask is do sign up to net zero, make those commitments, sign up to science-based targets, join the race to zero, and then deliver on those commitments. Work together. I mean, climate change is a huge risk that affects all of us around the world, but it also is a huge opportunity. There are great opportunities for businesses, but also, I mean, there will be jobs created as part of the new net zero future. And that is one of the things that young people, youth organizations raise with us regularly, as do trade unions, is the need for new jobs, but also a just transition. So key takeaway, I think, make those commitments, sign up, implement them. There is a big opportunity waiting for you.
Thanks very much, Nick. I can just see actually it's come up in the chat. Someone's asking for a link to the website, I think, for the Race to Zero. I wonder if you can access the chat, Nick, and I just after the event will be fine. But if you could put a link to it in the chat, that would be really helpful.
Okay.
I can't see lots of other questions in the chat, so I've got a question to finish with, if we might. And this is really for anybody who'd like to comment. I know it's been mentioned already. We obviously had the Climate Change Committee report recently, which said, we're not where we need to be. We're not on track. And I just wondered, what are your thoughts about? Do you think we can get back on track? Can we get to where we need to be without? With harnessing those opportunities and bringing everyone together and bringing everyone through it together. So perhaps whoever would like to comment, please do. I can see Mark and Mike have come off mute.
So I'll start if I may. I tend to be an optimist every other day and a pessimist on the others. I think it depends on how you look at it. It's that the whole glass half full, glass half empty. I do tend to be an optimist. So I think it is possible. And I think a lot of the work that we have done shows that there are pathways available for us to get to where we need to be in the timescale available. I think the challenge is that we have to take action now in the next 5 years, because after that it becomes incredibly difficult to make the sort of targets by 2038 in Greater Manchester, or even the 2050 targets set by government. So the real transition needs to happen in the next 5 years. And really what that means is, to add on to what Nick was saying, setting up for science-based targets is great, but 90-odd% of businesses in Greater Manchester are SMEs. And there are some really practical things that all businesses could do tomorrow. You could look to see whether you can move your energy supplier onto a fully renewable tariff. You could look to see whether, if you're a vehicle-based business, you can start to transition your fleet into ultra-low emission vehicles. You can look to see whether, if you're an office-based employer, you can support your staff to get to work by either public transport or by active travel. Transport for Greater Manchester has some great tools available to help people do that. You can look, if you own buildings, you can look to see whether you can make them more energy efficient or put energy generation on the roof through solar PV. There are lots of things that even small businesses could really do now to make a huge difference if we all do them together and do them collectively. And to answer your question, that's what's required. It can't be just a few of the larger businesses taking action. It needs to be the full cross-sectoral massive business that takes action in the next 5 years. That's how we'll meet the targets.
Thank you. Mike, did you want to add?
Yeah, just to add, Mark said pretty much everything I was going to say. I think the only thing I'd add is around, I mean, I've been around climate change and conversation about climate change for, I don't know, 15 years. Where we have come to in the last 15 years, this isn't a fringe occupation anymore. We've already massively changed our electricity supply industry in the UK. There are whole days where we are not burning fossil fuels in order to generate our power. Things like that are incredible transformation. So we have done it, but Mark's dead right. I think we've moved from a few people can make a big move to make a big difference. To get the rest of it done, we need everyone involved, everyone helped and supported to do the other things we need to do. So yes, we can look back and see where we could be, what we've achieved to get to where we are, and yes, there's a lot more to do.
Thanks very much. I was going to ask, we've got one question in the chat, which I just wonder, it's just turned 10:30, but Nick, can I just ask you really quickly to comment on science-based targets? I think, as Mark was saying, they can be a bit intimidating, I think, as a thought, particularly for the smaller end of the market. But, you know, are there lots of resources out there for people to have a look at these kind of targets?
Yes, so I've been talking about the Race to Zero, and there is something called the SME Climate Hub. So as Mark and Mike were saying, absolutely. I mean, a large portion of the economy is SMEs, and we appreciate that kind of sometimes it's the larger companies that have resources to dedicate to sustainability and things like that. So Nigel Topping, the High Level Champions, set up this SME Climate Hub, which is designed to provide support and resources and help to small and medium-sized companies to access these targets and deliver on sustainability programs. Excellent,
that's lovely. And if you were able to put a link to that in the chat as well as the Race to Zero, that would be brilliant, if that's not asking too much. But if not, I'm sure people can easily Google it and find it pretty easily. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much to Mark, Nick, Mike and Holly for your contributions today. I think that was a really interesting discussion, and hopefully it's given our audience some food for thought and some action points to take away. So without further ado, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.